The massive white dog clawed frantically at the rusted metal of the abandoned tank, his powerful paws making a haunting scraping sound that echoed across the empty military testing grounds. Blood stained his normally pristine coat as he dug with desperate determination. The dog's anguished howls pierced the morning air, catching the attention of the security patrol approaching in the distance. As Officer Martinez drew closer, the Dogo Argentino's behavior became more frantic, scratching, whining, and then looking back at the officer with eyes that seemed to beg for help. When Martinez finally reached the tank and peered inside the damaged hull, what he discovered left him speechless. There, in the darkness of the war machine, lay a sight that would change everything. Before we continue, if you enjoy incredible stories of animal heroism and unexpected discoveries, make sure to click that subscribe button. This is the best way for you to support our work. Thank you very much, and let's continue. The story of Atlas, the Dogo Argentino, began 3 years earlier on a small farm outside San Miguel de Tucumán, Argentina. The property belonged to Lieutenant Gabriel Mendoza, a decorated veteran who had served in the Argentine army for 15 years before retiring to raise his family away from the chaos of military life. The farm sat on the edge of an old military testing ground, a vast expanse of land that had once been used for tank and artillery training but had been largely abandoned after budget cuts forced the closure of many rural facilities. Gabriel had always loved animals, particularly dogs. There was something about their loyalty and unwavering dedication that resonated with him. Perhaps it reminded him of the brotherhood he had experienced during his time in service. His wife, Elena, had surprised him with Atlas as a puppy for his 40th birthday. The Dogo Argentino, with its muscular build and pure white coat, was bred for hunting wild boar and puma in Argentina's rugged terrain. But from the moment Atlas bounded into Gabriel's arms, it was clear this dog was meant to be a family companion rather than a hunter. Atlas quickly became an integral part of the Mendoza family. He would play for hours with Gabriel and Elena's 7-year-old twins, Mateo and Sofia, who adored the gentle giant. Despite his imposing size and strength, Atlas was extraordinarily gentle with the children, seeming to understand instinctively that they required a softer touch. At night, he would patrol the perimeter of the farmhouse, his white coat ghost-like in the moonlight as he kept watch over his family. Gabriel often took Atlas for long walks across the countryside, sometimes venturing close to the edge of the old testing grounds. The area was technically off-limits to civilians, but locals had been crossing the weathered fence line for years without incident. The abandoned tanks and military vehicles scattered across the landscape had become as much a part of the scenery as the rolling hills and gnarled oak trees. "This is where I learned to be a soldier," Gabriel would tell Atlas, as if the dog could understand the significance of these rusted war machines. "But you, my friend, you're teaching me to be a better man." Life on the farm followed a peaceful rhythm until the day everything changed. It began like any other morning. Gabriel rose at dawn, made coffee for Elena, and stepped outside with Atlas for their morning routine. The dog seemed unusually agitated, pacing the porch and whining softly. "What's wrong, boy?" Gabriel asked, kneeling to scratch behind the dog's ears. Atlas pressed his nose against Gabriel's hand, then turned toward the distant fence line and barked sharply. Gabriel squinted into the morning sunlight, seeing nothing unusual in the landscape. "It's probably just deer," he said, but Atlas wouldn't be calmed. The dog bounded off the porch and ran several yards before stopping to look back, clearly wanting Gabriel to follow. "Elena," Gabriel called through the open door, "I'm going to check something with Atlas. I'll be back for breakfast." Elena appeared in the doorway, still in her robe, a concerned expression on her face. "Is everything okay?" "Probably nothing," Gabriel reassured her, though something in Atlas's behavior had triggered his old military instincts. "Just going to take a quick look." Gabriel followed Atlas across the fields toward the fence line. The morning was unusually still, with none of the typical sounds of birds or insects that normally filled the air. As they approached the boundary of the testing grounds, Gabriel's unease grew. Atlas had never acted this way before, and the dog's tension was palpable. They crossed the dilapidated fence, Gabriel ducking under a section where the wire had long since fallen away. Atlas moved with purpose now, leading Gabriel deeper into the restricted area than they had ever ventured before. They passed the skeletal remains of a personnel carrier, its frame rusted and partially collapsed. Ahead lay the hulking forms of 3 M4 Sherman tanks, relics from a bygone era that had been used for target practice and then abandoned. Atlas headed straight for the middle tank, which sat at an odd angle, its turret twisted and one tread partially buried in the earth. As they drew closer, Gabriel heard it, a faint sound that made his blood run cold. It was the unmistakable cry of a child. Atlas reached the tank first, immediately beginning to scratch at a narrow opening in the hull where the metal had corroded away. Gabriel rushed forward, his heart hammering in his chest. He dropped to his knees beside Atlas and peered into the darkness within. "To now," he called, his voice echoing inside the metal chamber. "Is someone in there?" The crying stopped abruptly, replaced by a terrified whimper. "Help," came a small, trembling voice. "Please help us." The word sent a chill down Gabriel's spine. "I'm here to help," he said, keeping his voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "Are you hurt? How many of you are there?" "2," the voice replied. "Me and my brother. We can't get out. The door is stuck, and it's dark." Gabriel recognized the voice now. It belonged to Pablo Suarez, the 10-year-old son of a neighboring farmer. Pablo and his younger brother, Diego, were known for their adventurous spirits, often exploring where they shouldn't. "Pablo is Lieutenant Mendoza," Gabriel said, using his military title instinctively. "I need you to stay calm. Are either of you injured?" "Diego hurt his leg," Pablo replied, his voice steadier now. "He can't walk. We've been here all night." Gabriel assessed the situation quickly. The tank's main hatch appeared to be jammed shut, likely rusted in place after years of exposure to the elements. The opening Atlas had found was too small for an adult to squeeze through, and Gabriel doubted even the boys could escape that way. "I'm going to get you out," Gabriel promised. "But I need to go back to the farm and get some tools. My dog, Atlas, will stay with you." As if understanding the instructions, Atlas settled beside the opening, his body pressed against the metal hull. Gabriel patted the dog's head. "Good boy. Stay." Gabriel ran back to the farm, his military training taking over as he formulated a plan. He burst into the kitchen where Elena was preparing breakfast with the twins. "Call emergency services," he told Elena, already gathering tools from the shed attached to the house. "Pablo and Diego Suarez are trapped in one of the old tanks. Diego's injured." Elena's hand flew to her mouth, but she recovered quickly, reaching for the phone while Gabriel collected a crowbar, flashlights, rope, and the first aid kit he kept meticulously stocked. "What can we do, Papa?" Mateo asked, his eyes wide with concern. "Stay with your mother," Gabriel instructed, shouldering his improvised rescue pack. "I'll bring them home." Gabriel raced back across the fields, the weight of the tools nothing compared to the burden of knowing 2 children were counting on him. When he reached the tank, Atlas was exactly where he had left him, still vigilant beside the opening. "I'm back," Gabriel called to the boys inside. "I'm going to try to open the hatch." It took nearly 30 minutes of intense effort, leveraging the crowbar against the rusted metal, applying all his strength to break the seal that years of corrosion had created. Finally, with a grinding screech that set his teeth on edge, the hatch began to move. Gabriel redoubled his efforts, sweat pouring down his face despite the cold morning air. With a final heave, the hatch swung open. Gabriel shone his flashlight into the dark interior, revealing the 2 boys huddled together. Pablo blinked in the sudden light, his face streaked with dirt and tears. Beside him, 8-year-old Diego lay pale and frightened, his right leg bent at an unnatural angle. "You found us?" Pablo whispered, his voice filled with relief and awe. "Actually, Atlas found you," Gabriel corrected, nodding toward the dog who was now peering into the tank, tail wagging tentatively. He knew something was wrong. Gabriel carefully extracted Diego first, wincing at the boy's cry of pain as he lifted him from the confined space. The leg was definitely broken, possibly in multiple places. Pablo followed on his own, scrambling out of the tank and immediately wrapping his arms around Atlas in a grateful hug. As they made their way slowly back to the farm, Diego cradled in Gabriel's arms and Pablo walking alongside Atlas. The sound of sirens grew in the distance. Emergency services had responded to Elena's call and were meeting them at the farm. Gabriel felt a profound sense of gratitude for Atlas's intuition, for his own military training that had prepared him for emergencies, and for the twist of fate that had led them to be in the right place at the right time. The next few days were a blur of activity. Diego was taken to the hospital in San Miguel de Tucumán, where doctors confirmed multiple fractures in his right leg. The boy's parents, who had been frantic with worry after discovering their sons missing that morning, were overcome with gratitude toward Gabriel and Atlas. The local media picked up the story, and soon Atlas became something of a celebrity in the region. "Hero Dog Saves Trapped Children," read the headlines, accompanied by photos of the magnificent white Dogo Argentino sitting proudly beside Gabriel. But with the publicity came scrutiny. Officials from the military base questioned how the boys had accessed the restricted area so easily, and inspectors were dispatched to assess the safety of the abandoned equipment. Gabriel found himself in the uncomfortable position of defending his own trespassing while simultaneously arguing for better security measures to prevent future incidents. 3 months passed. Diego's leg was healing well, though he would walk with a slight limp for some time. The military had begun the process of removing the most dangerous equipment from the testing grounds, including the tank that had nearly become a tomb for the Suarez boys. Life was slowly returning to normal for the Mendoza family. Then came the morning when Atlas once again began acting strangely. Gabriel noticed it immediately: the restlessness, the whining, the fixation on the direction of the testing grounds. His stomach tightened with apprehension. "Not again," he murmured, reaching for his phone to call Elena, who was in town with the twins. "Atlas and I are going to check the testing grounds," he told her when she answered. "Something's not right. Be careful," Elena urged, worry evident in her voice. "Should I call someone?" Gabriel hesitated. "Not yet. Could be nothing. I'll call you as soon as I know more." This time, Gabriel brought his tools and first aid kit from the start, slinging the pack over his shoulder before following Atlas across the fields. The dog moved with the same purposeful determination as before, leading Gabriel straight toward the testing grounds. But instead of heading for the spot where the tank had been, now just an empty depression in the earth, Atlas veered to the right, toward an area they rarely visited. As they crested a small rise, Gabriel saw it: another tank partially concealed by overgrown vegetation. This one was different from the others, a newer model that shouldn't have been abandoned with the older equipment. Atlas broke into a run, and Gabriel followed, a sense of dread building in his chest. The dog reached the tank and immediately began scratching at its side, his claws making a terrible screeching sound against the metal. Gabriel approached cautiously, noticing that this tank showed no signs of the decades of rust and decay that had marked the others. In fact, it looked operational, with fresh tracks in the mud surrounding it. That's when Gabriel heard the groaning from inside. "Come now," he called, circling the tank to find the entry hatch. "Is someone in there?" The response was weak but unmistakable. A man's voice, speaking in a language Gabriel didn't immediately recognize. Russian, he realized with a shock. What was a Russian-speaking person doing in an abandoned Argentine military tank? The hatch was secured from the outside with a modern lock, which Gabriel quickly broke using his crowbar. He swung the hatch open, and Atlas immediately tried to jump into the opening, but Gabriel held him back. "Stay," he commanded firmly, before carefully lowering himself into the tank. The interior was cramped and dark, smelling of diesel fuel and something metallic: blood. Gabriel realized with a jolt. A man lay slumped against the far wall, his face pale and drawn with pain. He wore no uniform, just nondescript dark clothing, but Gabriel's trained eye noted the military bearing, the watchful gaze even in his weakened state. "I speak English," the man said before Gabriel could attempt communication. "You are not military." It wasn't a question. "I was," Gabriel replied cautiously. "Argentine Army, retired, Lieutenant Gabriel Mendoza." "Who are you?" "And what are you doing here?" The man grimaced, shifting to reveal a blood-stained bandage wrapped hastily around his torso. "My name is not important. Was security consultant. This tank was being evaluated for potential purchase." Gabriel's eyes narrowed with suspicion. This didn't sound right. In an abandoned testing ground? Without proper authorization or supervision? The man's laugh turned into a cough, flecks of blood appearing on his lips. "You are smart, Lieutenant. No, this was not official. Some people would pay very much for this technology. I was delivering it." Understanding dawned on Gabriel. Arms smuggling. This man was part of an illegal operation to sell military technology, possibly to hostile foreign powers. The implications were staggering. "You're injured," Gabriel said, focusing on the immediate concern. "What happened?" "My partners decided I was unnecessary," the man replied bitterly. "Bullet in the side. They left me to die, took the control codes with them. They will be back with transport." Gabriel's mind raced. If what this man was saying was true, dangerous criminals would be returning to this location soon. He needed to get the injured man to safety and alert authorities. "I can help you," Gabriel offered. "But you need to tell me everything. Who you're working with, what they're planning." The man studied Gabriel's face, seeming to weigh his options. "I have little choice," he finally conceded. "Help me out of this metal coffin, and I will tell you what you need to know." With considerable effort, Gabriel managed to help the injured man out of the tank. Atlas watched warily, growling softly as the stranger emerged into the daylight. The man was heavier than he looked, and Gabriel struggled to support his weight as they began the slow journey back toward the farm. They had gone perhaps 100 yards when the sound of approaching vehicles reached them. Gabriel helped the man down behind a cluster of rocks, signaling Atlas to stay low. 3 black SUVs with tinted windows appeared over the rise, driving with purpose toward the tank. Men in tactical gear spilled out, weapons clearly visible even at this distance. "Your partners," Gabriel whispered. The injured man nodded grimly. "They will not be happy to find me gone." Gabriel reached for his phone, but before he could dial, a sharp crack split the air, and dirt kicked up inches from his hand. A warning shot. "We've been spotted," he hissed, pulling Atlas closer. "We need to move. Now." But it was too late. The armed men were already fanning out, clearly searching for their missing comrade. Gabriel made a split-second decision, handing his phone to the injured man. "Call this number," he instructed, showing him Elena's contact. "Tell her to call the police and the military base. Tell her exactly where we are." Gabriel then turned to Atlas, unclipping the bandana he always wore around his neck, a bright red piece of fabric that stood out starkly against his white coat. "Go home, Atlas," he commanded, pointing in the direction of the farm. "Tom." Atlas hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave his master in danger. "Go," Gabriel insisted, clapping his hands sharply. With one last look of confusion, Atlas took off running, the red bandana making him easily visible across the open landscape. As Gabriel had hoped, the armed men spotted the dog immediately. "There," one shouted in accented Spanish. "The dog will lead us to him." Several of the men took off in pursuit of Atlas, exactly as Gabriel had planned. The loyal dog was leading them away, buying precious time for help to arrive. Gabriel turned back to the injured man, only to find him slumped against the rocks, the phone clutched limply in his hand. "Did you make the call?" Gabriel demanded, shaking him gently. The man nodded weakly. "She understood. Help is coming." He coughed again, more blood speckling his lips. "You should go. Save yourself." Gabriel shook his head firmly. "Not happening. We're both getting out of this." For nearly an hour, they played a deadly game of cat and mouse with the remaining armed men. Gabriel used his knowledge of the terrain to keep them moving from one piece of cover to another, gradually working their way toward the farm where he hoped police would be waiting. The injured man grew weaker with each passing minute, and Gabriel feared he wouldn't survive long enough to tell authorities what he knew. In the distance, Atlas's barking could be heard, leading some of the pursuers on a wild chase in the opposite direction. Gabriel silently thanked his faithful companion. Finally, the welcome sound of sirens reached their ears. The armed men heard it too, their shouts becoming more urgent as they realized their time was running out. Gabriel and the injured informant had nearly reached the fence line when 3 of the pursuers cut them off, weapons raised. "Stop right there," one commanded in heavily accented Spanish. "Hand him over, and you might live." Gabriel positioned himself between the gunman and the injured man. "Federal police are on their way," he said calmly. "This is over." The leader of the group laughed coldly. "Then we have nothing to lose," he replied, raising his weapon. A white blur shot out from behind a nearby outcropping of rocks. Atlas, somehow having circled back after leading the other pursuers away. The massive dog lunged at the gunman, his powerful jaws clamping down on the man's arm. The weapon discharged harmlessly into the ground as the man screamed in pain and surprise. The momentary distraction was all the time needed for the police vehicles to come roaring over the rise, officers pouring out with weapons drawn. The remaining gunmen quickly surrendered, recognizing they were outmatched. As paramedics tended to the injured informant, a police officer approached Gabriel, who was kneeling beside Atlas, checking the dog for injuries. "Lieutenant Mendoza?" the officer asked. "Your wife told us what was happening. She said your dog would lead us to you." Gabriel smiled tiredly, stroking Atlas's head. "He did more than that. He saved my life." Again, in the days that followed, the full story emerged. The security consultant was actually a former intelligence officer who had been recruited by an international arms dealer to help steal and deliver a prototype tank with advanced stealth technology. When he had expressed doubts about the plan, his partners had shot him and left him for dead, planning to return later with specialized transport equipment to move the tank. Thanks to Gabriel's actions and Atlas's extraordinary heroism, authorities were able to arrest the entire smuggling ring and recover valuable military technology that could have caused incalculable damage in the wrong hands. The military posthumously honored the informant, who had died from his wounds despite the best efforts of medical personnel. Gabriel received a commendation for his bravery, but he insisted that Atlas was the true hero of the story. The Dogo Argentino received unprecedented recognition from the Argentine military, a special medal of valor, the first ever awarded to a canine in the country's history. Pictures of Atlas wearing his medal beside Gabriel in his old uniform circulated worldwide, becoming a symbol of loyalty, courage, and the extraordinary bond between humans and their canine companions. But for Gabriel and his family, Atlas was simply their beloved pet, their protector, and their friend. And if the magnificent dog sometimes stood at the edge of their property, gazing toward the old testing grounds as if remembering his moments of heroism, well, that was just Atlas being Atlas. In the years that followed, the military completely cleared the old testing grounds, removing all abandoned equipment and establishing proper security measures. The land was eventually converted into a nature preserve, with a small memorial at its center, a bronze statue of a Dogo Argentino standing vigilant beside a tank, a testament to an extraordinary dog who twice detected danger where humans could not. Visitors to the memorial often remarked on the lifelike quality of the statue, how the dog's expression seemed to convey both strength and gentleness. Children would reach up to touch the bronze paws, worn smooth by thousands of hands, as their parents told them the story of Atlas, the dog who scratched at a tank and changed everything. And in a small farmhouse not far away, a real Dogo Argentino would lift his head at the sound of approaching footsteps, ever watchful, ever loyal, ready to protect his family from whatever dangers might come their way. Seen or unseen, human or otherwise, a true hero in every sense of the word.